The perfect deadlift. The perfect deadlift groove. I had this conversation with a coworker actually today. I really didn't get to elaborate much about it, but I told him I wanted to make a video on it, and it was really about how there's this special spot or special groove in the deadlift that allows the weight to float right up. And when the weight is light enough, and your technique, if you have really good technique and the weight is light, like 70, maybe 80% of your one repetition max, and you're pretty fresh, you can catch that perfect deadlift groove and the weight will float up. I guess this is my viewpoint and kind of my experience with the deadlift, because essentially from 400, basically from from deadlifting weight all the way up to about 455, maybe even 475. Let's just say 455. 455, essentially I can find that perfect deadlift groove pretty easily. I would have to say between 405 and 440, I can find that groove within 80 to 80% of the time fresh. Whereas when it gets to like the mid 400s or higher, that perfect groove is probably about a good 30% chance of missing, or I have 70% success chance rate of catching it. And what this really means to me, and kind of how I'll explain it to you, because I don't think some people can really explain, at least this viewpoint, is that there's this in a conventional deadlift when your shins make contact with the bar, your high hamstring and glute activate at the same exact time to allow the weight to float up. And if you are explosive enough and you are perfect with that lower back curvature, keeping that neutral spine, and able to kind of activate the hips external rotators, God, I wish I could just share this picture in my head of what exactly is going on. But essentially the high hamstrings kick in, also the entire hamstring, but just imagine the high hamstring connecting to the pelvis and the glutes firing with the external rotators kicking in, causing the femurs to externally rotate. And what that does, they all engage at the same time, almost like pressing all the piano keys. Imagine the piano keys as their piano keys have these wires, right, or notes or whatever, and it's almost like you press all the keys at the same time and these notes all fire at the same exact time. If you can imagine what that sounds like. It sounds like music, actually bad music, but that's when my analogy breaks down. But the idea is that you get that perfect spot where the weight floats up. And if you're aggressive and you go as hard as you can fast, what will happen is that you are able to explode into that perfect groove. I don't know if that makes any sense. Hopefully that does. And what that does, it allows the weight to launch off the ground. And then after you get that part off the ground, your lower back can carry the weight and float the weight up. And this is essentially what will happen when I deadlift 315, from 350, when I'm basically kind of getting into my warm-ups, 315 all the way to 400, the weight just floats. Because I'm very explosive from that segment. Now, when the weight gets heavier, for high 400s, over 500 pounds, 515, I can't get that spot, because the problem is right when I launch into that segment, physics sort of take over. Now, everyone will have a different opinion on kind of how they approach their deadlift, but the way I approach my deadlift is being able to explode into that sort of shin contact, high hamstring activation, glute activation, braced core, and then essentially pushing my body through the ground as the bar slides up my legs. And kind of what I wanted to explain to Manas, my coworker, talking about the deadlift, was being able to find that spot and finding the weight that allows you to get that spot accurately every single time, or at least 70 to 90% of the time. So that way you can get really good practice, because essentially once you get to 90% or even 85% or higher, or maybe 80%, 85% and you're fatigued, you can't find that groove anymore. You're too tired, because what ends up happening is you're not able to fire fast enough. It's almost like trying to jump on a box. Like when you jump on the box, it's not very hard. You jump, like just a very high box as an example. And then there'll be a point where you just can't jump anymore. And that's kind of what the deadlift is. It's kind of weird, because when you see someone deadlift a max weight for a one repetition max, especially like just anyone in a competition, it looks effortless, because all the stars align perfectly, because that perfect groove for that particular individual, whether it be sumo or conventional, essentially is able to line up at that point at the same time. They're fresh, their lower back, upper back is very strong, and they're able to use their entire body to fucking move that weight. And it's pretty cool. And that's sort of what you're doing. Like essentially, when you're not if you're not in that perfect groove, because the perfect groove of a deadlift is essentially like kind of like the path of least resistance. Because if you can get the perfect groove in the deadlift, what will happen is that it will be the easiest to lift. And that's essentially what will happen is you get it off the ground, you use all the muscles you can at the most deleveraged position because you're tucked down at the bottom at a conventional. And then what happens, it passes your knees, and then what happens is you lose acceleration. So you're able to accelerate the weight up, and then what happens, it gets past your knees, and then it slows down because the weight slows down. So, it's inertia. And my point of kind of talking about this is that groove is probably, to me at least, the most important thing when it comes to practicing on 1 repetition max. And a lot of the time when you're training, you're practicing that groove maybe, a third or half the time, while other times all you're doing is you're building strength. And when you're building strength, kind of what you're doing is you're trying to build your lower back up. You're trying to build some weak points, do some block pulls to work on upper back strength, getting faster with your start from a higher position. Deficits, getting faster off the ground, biasing your lower back with stiff legged deadlifts, maybe incorporating sumos to strengthen your hips and have different ways to kind of tax your system if you're a conventional puller, or if you're a sumo puller, train conventional to help strengthen your spinal erectors to stay more upright, to strengthen your hamstrings further, to essentially make your body stronger so that when you get out of that groove, you have the strength to bring it back in that groove. Because, man, I mean, eventually I'll do this, but it's like I can just imagine a line from here to here, right? And what it is like this is from point A to point B, from the bar from here to here. And just imagine sideways. You're looking, this is the bar, and just going up and down like this, okay? What happens is that distance from here to here has about this width of error point for a 70%. So that bar can move here and here, and you'll still make the weight up. And then what happens as you get strong, as the weight gets heavier, near 90, 95%, that groove gets smaller, smaller, and smaller. So let's just say 100%, right? If you're out of that groove for just a little bit, for something that's your true 100% of your 1 repetition max, you will miss the lift. Of course, there's a lot of other factors. I'm really talking more conceptually, but the idea is that once you keep it in that segment, what you're doing is you're allowing the path of least resistance. Because, when I was talking to Nas, I was saying, if you deadlift something really heavy off the ground, like 90% or basically 100%, something of your 1 repetition max, the weight's going to move slow. Yeah, of course, we know that. But what happens is you pull the weight pulls off slow, and what happens is that your hips shoot up just a tad bit too fast. And if you're really strong, your lower back is strong, your belt's tight, your brace tight, what you can do if your hips shoot up just a little bit too fast, you can shift your body back slightly, so that way you engage more of your glutes and hamstrings. You're still coming up, but your hips are shooting up, but then now you have to pull back a little bit, because when your hips shoot up, the bar goes away from your body. So if you lean back in the heels, what happens is the bar will get closer to your body again. And so basically, if you think this is the front of the if I'm deadlifting this way, you can imagine like this is the side of the bar. If my hips shoot up too fast, what happens to the bar is, the bar will theoretically go this way. It really won't. It's more like your body moves away from the bar. Like this is the legs. The body moves away from the bar. And then what ends up happening is when your body moves away from the bar, that means your hips are shooting up typically. Your legs are straightening out too fast. If you saw that 600-pound deadlift that I missed in my competition, that's basically what happened. My body moved away from the bar, and I could not get it back in the groove. So it's just like, once my legs straighten out, I was stiff legging it from my knee, and I can't stiff leg 600 pounds from my knee. If I could, I would have made that lift. But if I could stiff leg 600 pounds, I'm probably deadlifting like 650. But anyways, let me digress here. Digressing. So when the hips shoot up, the shins will move away from the bar. Sometimes for someone that's lifting in the 350s or 400s, and that's kind of close to 90% for you, the bar will move forward. Usually at 450, 500, the bar can't move forward. It's just too heavy, not enough inertia. Unless, I guess, if you're like 240-pound lifter, the bar will move forward. But most likely that your body will move more than the bar, because you're lifting 2.5, maybe 3.5 times your weight, or 3 times your weight. So, I don't know. Just wanted to talk about this. Wanted to share my thoughts. If you got anything from it, leave a comment below. I'd like to continue the discussion. Comment below. See you guys.